screen live. Everyone can see that. So we are good to go. So thanks everyone for joining us on this third Routinehub Shortcuts review session. Presenting today is myself, Twilsonco, and also Jpasholk.
Glad to be here.
So without further ado, we're going to get started, and the shortcuts that were selected for today's session are shown on my screen redundantly, and me and Jpasholk are just going to alternate through these, and he's going to get us started with the launcher shortcut.
All right. I'm trying to plug my Mac in, but it's not going to work, so we'll have to go on battery right now. One sec here. Let me get my notes up. Sorry, everybody. Just a little...
Yeah, no worries. Take your
a
time.
little behind here, so let's go.
So thanks everyone again for joining. This is the review, shortcut review sessions. This is the third installment of this, so third in the series. We rounded up about 5 shortcuts from the submissions to dive into today. If we have some more time, we will get into some other ones. So no worries. We'll be in here for at least an hour, going through and reviewing different things. So big shout out to Twilsonco and Jpasholk for hosting again this third session, and I'll hand it off to them mostly. So thank you guys for joining.
Happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, me too. So yeah, let's see, launcher. So I had only just heard about this from last night and checked it out a little bit. Pretty complex shortcut that he's got here. So it looks like it's kind of just like a super configurable launcher thing. So like basically when you just run it, it says you have no slots. Or did you already put some things in there?
Yeah, I added a shortcut, a URL, and an app so that we can see
nice.
the full breadth of capabilities.
Awesome, yeah. So before that, it asks you to start filling out stuff. So this is really cool because this is kind of like I wanted to add some functionality to SC settings like this, where it would give users the option to configure what they wanted on all the the settings, like URL schemes, and so yeah, it's got a lot of stuff going on here. So it's kind of funny though, like launcher shortcuts, like this long story short for me is like I don't know if I would ever really use anything like this per se, because like I just use just pull down on my screen and type an app in and launch it, or I actually use the app library, Spotlight, yeah, or I just swipe right and use the app library. But at the same time, though, this is awesome, like just the way it's done, and then I could see it potentially being like an action button shortcut, which unfortunately I don't have an action button yet, so I will soon. I guess probably end of the year. But yeah, when I was scrolling through this, it is just I'm gonna definitely take some inspiration from this. Yeah, it looks like he's using a lot of V-card menus, which we could potentially replace with our
menu generator.
Anyway, so I mean, Ken, what did you think of it? Did you actually start using it as far as just a little bit of stuff?
Yeah, so I played with it a little bit, just adding it in. There's a few corners that need to be rounded off, but I think that regarding what you said about launcher shortcuts, for the most part, you're right. A lot of the functionality can just be found in Spotlight, but I don't think Spotlight at the moment lets you run a shortcut by name. And so,
yeah, I don't think so. You're right.
That's actually true. So, like, if I type in Oh, never mind, it does. Okay. Yeah,
Nice.
so, arguably, these launcher shortcuts are, given that you can do most of this stuff via Spotlight, these launcher shortcuts are kind of, I think, more like academic. They're cool proofs of concept for
Right.
seeing how you can put together a nice looking user interface using the things like the choose from list and vcard menus inside of shortcuts. And it does what it sets out to do. I had some issues when I was trying to assign custom icons for the Routinehub page and for the Actions app. And there's a couple things that don't quite work right on Mac OS, but that were working good on iOS. But so it does what it's supposed to do. So if I tap the Gemini via API shortcut that I added as a slot, it runs the shortcut, and then I can go ahead and like go through with that shortcut. And so it works. And of course, unlike Spotlight, you get these additional permissions dialogues. So the first time that I tried to open up Routinehub via this shortcut, it asked for permission to open a URL and stuff like that. So there's
Right.
there's sort of some built-in drawbacks from using shortcuts to do just about anything, because Apple has to try really hard to make sure that shortcuts can't be used maliciously, which is sort of the downside of being able to share a shortcut. But the thing I liked about Launcher was that it's very simply done. So it's a good example of proper data organization inside of a shortcut. So
Yeah.
instead of having these like text actions that store base 64 text strings to represent images, all of this stuff is buried inside of a dictionary so that you don't have to look at it. I remember the first time I opened up a shortcut that was using a stored base 64 string for something. I think it was like the eject water from your speakers shortcut. And like the first time I saw that, I didn't realize that all he did was take a sound file, convert it to base 64, and copy the string, and then save that inside the shortcut. The first time I saw that, I thought it was magic. I thought it was like there's some hidden language in shortcuts, and somehow this string equates to this sound. It didn't make any sense to me at all. And so it's nice to just hide that kind of stuff away from the user, since shortcuts makes it easy to open it up and see what's happening. And then the rest of the so you can see here like where he's building the vcard menu, where it says photo encoding B. So right here is a base 64 string, but he's just accessing it from the data dictionary at the top of the shortcut. And so you don't
Right.
have these massive base 64 strings in here. And so I think that's a really nice touch. Also,
Yeah.
the other thing that Launcher does that I like compared to some other shortcuts that try to provide a repetitive user interface is that it doesn't stick everything inside of a giant repeat block. Instead, it utilizes recursion, where the launcher shortcut will run the launcher shortcut. And so it can just keep going without needing to have a repeat loop. And so that makes the overall structure of the shortcut a little bit easier to look at. And it's a really well done shortcut, really well organized. You can tell this isn't his first shortcut. Oh yeah, we forgot to mention. So this is Launcher by INA Coding, who is not in the audience, but shout out to INA Coding. This is a fantastic shortcut. I think it's a really cool proof of concept. At the moment, it doesn't do anything that Spotlight doesn't do, but it's a pretty good example of a nice vCard user interface, and the ability of shortcuts to run an app, to run another shortcut.
Right.
And it doesn't require any modification of the shortcut to run. So if you have another shortcut that you want to run, so say I want to run the AirDrop shortcut from Launcher, you just go through the user interface. You select the folder that the shortcut is in, and then it loads up all the shortcuts with their icons. It looks really nice, and you just select the one that you want.
Yeah. The one thing I think it can do that Spotlight can't is, so the URL action, you can probably paste a settings URL scheme in there.
Yeah, so you could
Yeah.
use that for quick access to like Wi-Fi, but then again,
Yeah, or a bunch of different deep buried settings or whatever.
yeah,
but,
so like Spotlight also does that to some degree.
Yeah.
So like I can just hop right
But
into
you still
Wi-Fi.
have to type it. Yeah, you still have to type it in and blah blah. But
And certainly
So-
as iOS continues to progress, we're going to see more and more of these shortcuts that are just trying to extend iOS become redundant and competitive with built-in operating system features. But regardless,
Yeah,
I
so-
think it's a really cool shortcut for anyone who wants to dig inside the shortcut to see how to make their own user interfaces look nicer.
Yeah, I still need to start trying to take advantage of the recursive functionality. I think the last time we had chatted on the whatever we called it, when we were talking about the menu generator, I'd never even considered that. That's an awesome way to not have a bunch of these 20 if statements or whatever. So
Yeah, if we end up getting through this whole list, then the very last shortcut that we'll review is one of mine, which has some really great examples of how a shortcut can feel more like a legitimate program through the use of calling itself to access different functions. And it's not entirely straightforward how to achieve it, but once you're used to it, it really helps you avoid having redundant actions in your shortcut. Like you can make a function for sorting a list, and now you can just call your own shortcut running the sort list function in multiple places inside of your shortcut. And it also allows you to have you could have a library shortcut that just contains a whole bunch of common functions that you find yourself utilizing in other shortcuts. And so it kind of opens up a whole new world of shortcut development. And of course, none of it is performant, since the more complex a shortcut gets, the slower it is. But it's a cool way to simplify the structure of the shortcut, make it a little bit more readable. Because otherwise, if everywhere that you sort a list, you have to have all the actions necessary to sort a list, it ends up just being really difficult to look at and digest what's going on inside the shortcut. But if instead you just see sort list and then run shortcut, and then you use the output of the run shortcut and you've got a sorted list, that's a lot easier for somebody to understand what's happening.
Piggybacking off of that, I'm going to just throw this out to the universe because I'm hoping someone has a better answer to it. And if you get to it, Twilsonco, great. What would be the equivalent of like a switch case? Because that's the thing I find myself struggling with is if else, if else, if else. I'd rather just have a switch somehow. Maybe there's a creative way to do that.
I mean, so in general, like shortcuts, since you can't have compound conditionals, so like if you want to check if two different things are true at the same time, it's kind of difficult to do that. And so the if mechanism, the conditional programming mechanism inside of shortcuts is sort of intentionally oversimplified, I think. And if there's no overlap, so for example, in a switch case in a programming language like C, for example, it's generally assumed that only one case is going to be triggered. And if that's the case in your shortcut, then you don't need any of the otherwise blocks. So you don't need if, otherwise, and then you stick another if inside of the otherwise block. You can just use if and then end if and just have one if after the next. That way everything stays one level deep instead of having nested if statements. But
I see. Okay.
But for the most part, like you're stuck with if statements. There's no real syntactic equivalent to a switch case.
There you go. I threw my ass to the universe and I got the answer back. Thank you.
No problem, Chris.
Yeah.
For the audience, Chris is he's the father of Routinehub, and so thank you for joining us, Chris. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you guys. I always enjoy these discussions, and please, everyone, consider this a place for you to ask the hardest question or the easiest question. I really think there's a lot of value to be gained from just questions in general. So please do. And in the meantime, thank you guys.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. Shortcuts, it's designed so that people who have no programming experience whatsoever are not scared of trying something inside of shortcuts. And so if you've got any programming experience or even just experience with shortcuts, it's a fantastic place to pass on your own knowledge to people that are just starting off. And then even if you're a seasoned programmer, so I've got a lot of experience with Fortran and C++ and Python and now Julia, and shortcuts is like the worst programming language that's ever been invented. And so it's interesting. It's a funny type of challenge. It's like giving a master carpenter, a screwdriver and a bottle of Elmer's glue and asking him to go build something that he's, more accustomed to building with a full toolbox.
It's a good example.
And so it really, like one of my shortcuts, the photo collage shortcut, the whole reason that I did that was because it irked me that there's no way to deal with multidimensional arrays in shortcuts. And one day while I was, I don't even know, trying to fall asleep or something, it occurred to me how I can twist shortcuts arm in order to get the behavior of a multidimensional array. So for example, having like rows and columns, if you wanted to be able to modify a particular element at row 5, column 2 in some array, like shortcuts doesn't have a way of doing that that's straightforward. But once I thought of a way to do that, all of a sudden I thought, oh wow, if I can do that, then I can do the entire photo collage program, which previously was just a Python program. And then in the process, I had to overcome all these other limitations of shortcuts. And it was a really educational experience, because now I don't think there's been a single instance since I finished that shortcut where I've had to do something and it wasn't immediately obvious to me what the process was to get shortcuts to do it. So it kind of just pushed the limits to their extreme for me.
There may be even a way to twist shortcuts arm to figure out switch statements or switch case.
Yeah, like another example. Oops. Another example I can think of is that they have repeat blocks, but there's no while loop. And if you're not familiar with programming, a while loop is it's a loop that continues to repeat until some condition has been met. And in shortcuts, you can repeat a certain number of times, or you can repeat over some collection of items, but there's no way to just repeat until a condition is met, and also there's no way to break out of a repeat loop. And so you might think, oh, well, I don't need a while loop. I'll just repeat 1,000,000 times, which you can do, but there's no way to break out of that loop. And so if you put a repeat 1,000,000 times action in your shortcuts, it'll sit there for 5 minutes after your condition has been met until it exhausts all the prescribed iterations. But
could you put an if statement before something that potentially, so a count, and then an if statement that then repeats count times?
Yeah, so that's
still
kind of the best that you could do is like you could you put the entire contents of the repeat inside of an if statement inside the repeat, and then you maintain this variable that says should break or something, and if should break is false, then it executes whatever's inside the if statement, and then once the if statement runs, or once the condition is met, you set should break to true, and now it just loops, and all it has to do is check should break again and again and again and again and again until you're all out of iterations. But it still takes forever because shortcuts is just so slow. Like
Yeah.
if you did a Python, and like I don't even know if it's a fair comparison to say that if you did a Python loop that looped a million times and didn't actually do anything inside the loop, it wouldn't take any time at all, because I'm pretty sure that Python is advanced enough to look at what's going on inside the loop and say, it's not doing anything. I'm just going to skip out of this.
Right.
Because like other programming languages, you have like a compiler, or in Python's case, an interpreter that's at least very advanced. But the way that Shortcuts is built, each action is essentially running its some precompiled binary program somewhere, and like an if statement has no idea what's going to be inside of the if statement, and Shortcuts itself has no idea what's going to be inside of the if statement. It's basically just like a really simple scripting language where every single line is executing a different program. And so beyond that, there's no optimization to be had, really. But I digress. To finish that last point, there's no while loop in Shortcut, but you can achieve the behavior of a while loop through recursive calls. So what you can do is you can have a shortcut where all it does is check some condition, and then if the condition is, for example, true, then it will run itself again. And once the condition is false, then it quits. And there's still a limitation there, because who knows how deep the call stack is allowed to go in shortcuts. So how many times a shortcut is allowed to call a shortcut that calls a shortcut that calls a shortcut, until the Shortcuts app says, hey, this is consuming too much memory, I'm just going to quit. And so you still don't get a true while loop out of it, because a while loop, if you just say while true, then you get an infinite loop that never breaks. And that's not necessarily a good thing, but there's no way to replicate that behavior in Shortcuts. But you can use recursive calls to get, for the most part, the behavior of a while loop. There's a few Reddit posts on this topic. But moving on, the next one that we're going to look at is called Fancy Login. And this one is just a beauty. So I'm going to open it up on Mac here so that we can look at the whole shortcut. And so this shortcut is nothing more than a very well-designed CSS HTML web page. And so the bulk of the shortcut is this text action that has the entire web page coded in here. There's a few customizable things like the background color, the foreground color, the text color. It uses a nice linear gradient. And so when you run the thing, I'm going to run it on my phone. When you run the thing, it opens up a Safari page, and you get this awesome login window. And it's functional, so you can come in and actually log in. Of course, I have no idea what I'm logging into here, but and the password is actually concealed. So this is potentially a really awesome way of getting user credentials. So like maybe, and I haven't thought of the actual use case here, but like maybe you have like a folder on your network drive and you like to be able to access that folder from your iPhone, but you want to restrict access. So you can stick the connection information to the network drive in this shortcut and access it this way, so that you create the appearance of a secured access mechanism to it. And so while I'm not totally sure what the intended use case is here, maybe we get some clues from here. Yeah, I mean, I think this is basically the goal of Fancy Login, is to break the confines of shortcuts using AppleScript or using JavaScript.
Yeah, I can see it being like if you wanted to enable people that you let log into a private server or something, and you're giving them a user ID and password themselves or something, like Like you could potentially use this for, I don't know, a time clock if you wanted to build a time clock in shortcuts or something.
Yeah, and
You know?
unfortunately, we don't have Dr. Cummy Mummy Mem in the audience, but I'm sure they can provide some insight. And it's I would warn anyone in the audience from assuming that this actually provides a true layer of security, because anything that you send using like an open URL call or a get contents of URL call in shortcuts, the URL that you use, and if you use like a post get message from or get contents of URL action, anything that you send across that is going to be readable from whoever controls your network. And so there's potential for sniffing the web traffic from your phone and getting it that way. And so there's multiple higher levels of security and encryption that are in place. For example, when you do things like open up your banking app on your phone, it's not just sending your unencrypted username and password as part of the URL that it calls. Whereas in this case, what this shortcut is going to do is it's going to collect. So when you click done on here, it's going to copy the username and password to the clipboard, and then in here it fetches the contents of the clipboard, and now it can do something with the username and password. And so
Right.
it's the illusion of a more complete layer of security. But if your goal is to like keep your kids or your friends from thinking that they can just access some location that you don't want them to have access to, this definitely creates a facade of the type of security that would probably scare them off, unless you're all a bunch of computer science friends, and then they'll just take it as a challenge.
Right.
But this is really cool. One of the coolest things about shortcuts, I think, that is not at all apparent to people that are just getting into shortcuts, and even like some intermediate and advanced users, is the amount of beautiful user interface customization that you can achieve by writing a web page in a text action and then opening up that web page either using an open web view action, or and the way this one works is it uses the data x callback URL in order to use Safari to open the page itself. And it's a really cool trick that, in my mind, separates the more nuanced, advanced shortcut developers and those with a decent amount of web development experience from the rest of us plebes.
Yeah, no, it's definitely beautiful, and I think that's where it shines, is the 2 points that the breaking the confines, but also just presenting a really, really beautiful interface. I mean, there's definitely some work that went into making that look good and stuff. So that's a great example of anybody that wants to look at how that's done. Check this out, and then you can see and especially I think that data text way of doing it is better for executing JavaScript, I think, too, right?
Yeah, probably. And I mean, in my mind, so I try to make my shortcuts so that they can be run from Siri, so that they can be run from a widget, or from inside of the Shortcuts app. And so anytime that the shortcut has to lean on another app, it sort of breaks one of my personal rules for shortcuts, because my imagination of a typical user is that they're going to be like, what's happening here? How come the shortcut isn't just showing me the thing? Why is it taking me to a Safari page? And so I usually don't like to cross that threshold, but it unlocks some really cool stuff if you're willing to do that. And we've got a comment from .dev. So here's a suggestion on how to improve the dynamic nature of the login window, so that it would be more so that because you saw on my phone when I ran this thing, I have an iPhone mini, and so this thing comes up and it's just teensy weensy. And so if you utilized some different CSS here, or HTML, sorry, I'm not actually a web dev. I don't know where the boundary is between CSS and HTML when I'm looking at it. But if you utilized some different magic sauce here, then you could potentially get, a login window that filled the screen in a portrait or in a portrait aspect ratio, and maybe it could also add in like line breaks so that you don't have to keep the text so small. Is that what you had in mind, .dev?
I'd be curious if anyone else in the community has some feedback on how was that HTML written? Was it just some boilerplate and they modified it, or do they use a tool to create that HTML, then they paste it into the shortcut?
Well, that's a good question. In my case, I know enough terminology that I can wield Google Gemini and ChatGPT in a pretty effective way to make this stuff for me. So you can just say, like, I want to make an HTML login window. I want it to have a nice linear gradient for the background color. I want it to mask the password, and I want it to have a login button and a forgot my password button. And that's enough for either of those chat bots to get you 90% of the way there.
That's really cool. That's a great idea. I'd never considered that. Really cool.
Yeah, my guess is it's created with some sort of a live server or something, or they're testing it. Like they have to be creating it with Visual Studio Code or something with a live server running. I mean, I would hate to not do that. A little bit of web dev experience I have, which is not much, but it's more than the average Joe. That would be just painful to try to do it within shortcuts and then run it every time to look at it, and so.
Yeah, I agree. when I've done this kind of stuff, what I'll do is I'll make a text file on my computer, save it with an HTML file extension, and then you can just point Safari to the text file, and then you can have it open in Safari in one window, and you've got your text editor in another window, and you can make changes, save the file, refresh the page in Safari, and see if you like how it looks.
Right, yeah.
And so that's a much more rapid development style.
So in VS Code, it happens like without even saving it too. It's really nice. You pretty much almost see live. It's like every 5 seconds the little mini server updates.
Okay, but you're running a server, right? Like Nodemon, or you're running some sort of like React backend server to render it?
It works all in VS Code.
Cool. I didn't see that.
It's like some plugin. I only use it when I'm actively developing my own CSS stuff, which has been a long time from now. Like, yeah, for the most part, you can just kind of, reload or save the file and reload every 10 minutes or so and see the changes.
Interesting.
Yeah, and like the VS Code is definitely a better way to go. And I guess that if you're familiar enough to be using an HTML text file in your web browser, that's no more conceptually difficult than just getting a copy of VS Code up and running.
Yeah, it's great. I love VS Code. It's just, it's got GitHub integration, and you don't really need to leave it, for the most part.
Yeah, I've abandoned all my old editors. Now I just use Visual Studio Code for everything. I really like it.
Yeah. Yeah, I need to actually spend some time configuring mine, because I've been, like, when I was helping you make the Markdown for Menu Generator, I was using an app called Obsidian, which is really good for Markdown stuff, but it was kind of, I was having to jump between programs, and I'd rather not do that. So, but it's nice to do that too, though, just so you have a second backup, like in case anything goes wrong.
Yeah. So moving on, this next shortcut is a beast. a big, beautiful
Yeah.
beast. So I'm going to let Jpasholk
Yeah.
introduce here.
So this one's awesome, so awesome actually too. It's again similar to the first one where, again, I don't know if I'd ever use it because it's almost too much of a beast. And I mean, I have a lot of good things to say about it, so I'll start with the bad. So it has this another good thing actually. I love the little sound it makes. It starts up. It accesses some file stored in the device to do it. Anyway, so that's awesome. So, but then it's just so huge, and I'm like, okay, where do I even start? And the only thing I don't like about it is that I don't like the icons because they just don't really match iOS for me, and I'm such a purist. But yeah, you can search on just about every platform you could think of. I haven't really tested a lot of it because I only checked this out last night. But you can search on Amazon, Bing, DuckDuckGo, um, eBay, Google, Reddit, Twitter, Yahoo, YouTube. Um, it's got nice back button functionality. So I've actually never checked out iCuts either, which is it seems really cool. I kind of want to check that out by the user. Is his username. And then it's got this great control center, so you can change your text size, set a timer, alarm clock, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth on and off. Oh,
Yeah, so this is what happens if you try to load a file from iCloud that hasn't been downloaded and cached through iCloud Drive ahead of time. And the workaround is to, in your shortcut, every single time it runs, it should try to create the folder. And this will cause iCloud to do the necessary caching so that you don't get errors like this. Because I ran this the first time on my Mac. Now I'm trying to run it on iOS, and I'm seeing these issues. And so, like, it says the file setup text couldn't be opened, and it'll say that again the next time I run it. So I got that error by doing iCuts and then selecting my username because I already went through this setup process once. So if I open up users and open up the folder for mine, now it's pre-cached setup.txt. If I run it again, I won't get this error.
right. I love the sound though. That's just so cool.
Yeah, so now it goes through. And so, a note to people using iCloud for storage is if you want stuff to sync between devices, a workaround for things not caching correctly, because iCloud Drive is terrible. It's got to be the worst cloud syncing thing I've ever seen in my life.
It's true.
It's so bad.
Yeah. I mostly just use it for all my photos. But yeah, I don't know. This is pretty cool though. So there's like these larger actions it can do. Fast charging, QR codes, calculate route, open URL of your choice, like a better low power mode. You can open Shazam, put down your device. Really cool. I'm probably gonna take some inspiration from this when I do a rewrite of SC settings. So, and then a button for support, which is really cool. And then, of course, open the Routinehub page. So, yeah, definitely. Can you see how many actions this thing has? It'd be interesting to see. I'd guess like at least 200 or 300, if not 500.
Yeah, let me see here.
Yeah, we should probably do a little more research when we're doing this, but maybe have the notes a day ahead of time.
So
super impressive.
Isn't there like a get details of shortcut?
So if you throw an action to open your shortcuts, like you just
okay.
Yeah, or get shortcuts, then I think it'll have that little list, or it'll have the actions in there. So one thing I learned actually too. So if you just open this and then or run the shortcut and say open app, if you have like the open apps whatever action, Then if you just have it ask for the app, it'll give you a list of all of your apps. Little thing that I didn't know. That's really cool. One thing I wish shortcuts could do is if you could change the heading at the top. So
here we go. Let's see. Oh yeah, there you go. 794 actions.
wow. Yeah, I was guessing maybe, like I said, 300 to 500, but that's
Yeah, it's a beast. It's big enough that I'm not going to try and open it on Mac because it just brings the Shortcuts app to a halt.
it's funny. And settings. So he's got settings here. So I haven't. The one setting I wish he had too is to turn sounds on and off. That's something that, like, when I built my Skyrim one, I'll actually, whenever I run it, I turn the sounds off because it's just kind of annoying. I just put them in there anyway for fun. So,
Oh yeah,
and
looks like. Oops, wrong one. Wrong one. Looks like a couple of these recursive. Oh my gosh, what have I done? Go away.
Oh, I scrolled all the way to the bottom of it, and it took me like very long. So yeah, this one was created by Shortcut Factory, and then it says supported by the user and Outland 3R 2007. So definitely some great work here.
And a quick note to the developers. One of the recursive calls here, when you go to settings and then back, it's trying to call. Oh, it worked that time. What the hell did I do the first time? Never mind. We'll check the recording. That there was an error that showed last time. It made it look like it was trying to run a shortcut that didn't exist because it was trying to run a copy of the shortcut that had the version number as part of the name.
Oh.
But yeah, this is a cool shortcut because ultimately this is a lot like a launcher shortcut. And so much of this stuff, as we previously discussed, has overlap with stuff that you can just do in Spotlight. But this one does some cooler stuff because, like, in Spotlight, you cannot, I guess you probably can. You can just include like the word Reddit with your search.
Right.
But this is a more explicit way of searching different services, which I like.
Right.
And one of the cool things about this is that if you dig into the shortcut, then you'll see how they're constructing this, because there's no action in shortcuts for search YouTube, or search Yahoo, or search Twitter, or X. And so what's going on here is, they're either constructing an appropriate URL that loads the website with the right search term, or in some cases they might be accessing a website API to make this stuff happen. And so there's some more advanced stuff. If it's the latter, if they're using APIs to do stuff, these are things that you don't necessarily expect Spotlight to be able to do unless Apple has some pre-existing relationship with the company that maintains the website so that they can bake that functionality into Spotlight. And like these actions, some of these are things that you can just do within Shortcuts. Like, I think Shortcuts has some nice actions for dealing with QR codes now. And so this might just be baking those QR code actions into the shortcut so that you don't have to make your own shortcut for it. Or they might be doing some nifty stuff with writing HTML and JavaScript to make these things happen. I'm curious about the fast charging. That sounds like a cool trick. And as I went through when I went to set up my iCuts account, before there was an account in there, it opened up a nice rendered website. And so in addition to 794 actions, this shortcut also takes the time to have some nice websites defined as HTML and CSS and stuff that it's loading up inside of a web view. And so a lot of blood, sweat, and tears going into the eye control shortcut.
I can imagine all the blood, sweat, and tears that happened. Um, it kind of reminds me of something that I think we chatted about last time ish, where there's some shortcut developers that have created several different shortcuts, and then they create one to kind of call them all, which is a good way to kind of do it sometimes. But it's almost like at a certain point you're kind of replacing the functionality of the operating system, and so it's like it's like shortcut OS, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And it seems that there's a lot of overlap between the more diehard shortcuts community and the jailbreak community.
Yeah.
And so I think part of what you're talking about has to do with that. They're sort of accustomed to being able to do whatever they want with iOS if you're on a jailbroken device.
Right. Yeah. That's kind of where I hail from. I was a hardcore jailbreaker for a long time. I every device I ever had was always jailbroken until it got just so difficult to manage, and I'm not going to sit there and every week like re-sign an app or something, or whatever. And then also too, I think the iPhone X, iPhone 10 or whatever was the last one that was a proper-ish jailbreak.
Yeah, so, I've heard rumors that 17.3 might get a jailbreak, but who knows? It's also really sketchy because there used to be a more cohesive jailbreak community with Sarek and Cydia and stuff, and and even though the jailbreaks would come from different places, you always had this like core group of people that could validate that stuff was safe for the community. And so like now, like I certainly wouldn't recommend a lay person to try and jailbreak their device unless they had some previous experience. But moving on, we've got airdrop message. And so this is a fun message because airdrop is sort of an overlooked feature, in my opinion, of the of the Apple ecosystem. And so it's nice to see, son of a gun. Come on, what are we missing here? Oh, I don't have bit update. Well, if my shortcuts doesn't contain bit update, then how come it's trying to run bit update? Interesting. Okay.
That's funny.
What if that just goes away?
It's weird because mine doesn't do that at all. So. Huh.
There we go. I just got rid of that action. So this one's cool. It lets you just define some text and send it to an AirPlay device, or you can open up a canvas. And this is, so it's using the markup functionality. So I think what he's done is he's just defined a white or a dark image using like base 64 or something. And then you can come in here and scribble. And then once you're done, then you can send it to, it just opens up the share sheet. So you can just send it to whoever. And the idea is that you're going to send it to an AirPlay recipient. So very cool.
Yeah.
And then if we...
It's funny. It's funny though, like I know almost nobody that uses AirDrop.
Yeah, it's a really overlooked feature. And it's cool because the way that AirDrop works is it will either use the Wi-Fi network that you and the recipient are on, or you can use it in the middle of the desert, and it will create an ad hoc Wi-Fi network. It starts with a Bluetooth connection to identify recipients, and then, in order to send the file faster, it'll create an ad hoc network, a Wi-Fi network, just to send the file, and then the network disappears once it's done. So it's a really clever way of sending data. But I think the reason it gets overlooked is because nowadays, there's like 1,000 different ways of sending data pretty quickly. But, like back in the day, I remember I used to have like USB infrared receivers and transmitters. so that I could send information at like 1 kilobyte per second or whatever. It was just miserable. But like, before USB thumb drives existed and before, Dropbox and similar services were ubiquitous, AirDrop would have been really, really cool. And now it sort of gets overlooked. I think Apple uses AirDrop as a backend for some of their other features. So like with new iOS devices, you can share contact information by holding the devices close to each other. And I'm pretty sure that the way that works under the hood is using AirDrop, because I don't think that NFC or near field communication actually gets you very good throughput of data, and so instead it's just using that in place of Bluetooth to establish the AirDrop connection. But as I speculated, you can see here that when you do a canvas, the light and dark images that you start with are just base64 images, and so it decodes these base64 strings to an image, and then it opens up that image with markup so that you can draw on it. And you've got some nice V cards in here. Oh, that's for the updates.
So I actually, when I tried it last night too, I had an issue when I went to Canvas and then tried to draw on a dark background. Nothing was happening. So the pen itself, the color wasn't. I have to go set it to white, I guess.
Yeah, because it defaults to black, so you'd have to come in here, pick a white color.
It's still not working.
And then you'd be good.
Oh, there we go. Finally worked.
But yeah, so that's fun. It's quick and easy. The majority of the actions in this shortcut are just for updating the shortcut. It looks like the meat of the shortcut is pretty small.
Right, and then who created this one again? This was Ashbit.
Yeah, this is
right.
Ashbit.
Yeah.
Who's about to finish his senior year. Congratulations, Ashbit.
Nice.
So that'll
he
be
keeps
cool.
mentioning. He keeps mentioning. I've seen him mention a couple times. You can't work on shortcuts right now, or like can't install any apps or anything. I'm like, what's going on? We got to get this guy a phone or something.
Yeah, that's a cool way for the, we should get like Routinehub GoFundMe's up to get new devices for favorite developers so that they can make sure stuff is cross-compatible and whatnot.
Right.
So the next one is Commander GPT. And so...
Yeah. So you know what? I didn't check this one out yet, so I'll let you start and then we can chat about it a little bit. So I admittedly am just still kind of dumb-ish with all these different AI things. I mean, I definitely use ChatGPT a decent amount actually for work and stuff, but I've never really used them with shortcuts yet.
So this looks to be using the ChatGPT app, which is always a nice touch. Oh, that was brief. I was hoping for like an itemized list of steps to shave.
So is there any benefit for using the app or the API? I mean, the API is probably a little more versatile, but the app would probably be a little safer.
Cool. Did you see me change my volume just now?
That's pretty cool.
So this is you have to make a decision in shortcuts. Do you want to provide a user interface or do you want to try and bake stuff in? Let's see, what if I do this? Awesome. Of course, I don't think you guys can tell since I'm broadcasting, yeah. So it doesn't change for you guys, but it just took my brightness to half.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
and then you can just like hit this guy and just be like, be quiet and mute. Oh, okay. So, we're still getting there. That's cool though. So there's a couple of shortcuts that I've seen recently. So like there's Echo, there's Alpha, and these are all shortcuts that are basically trying to use ChatGPT to drive other shortcut actions. Like, as it is, you can ask ChatGPT to write a poem about how to brush your teeth in the voice of a pirate. But you can't ask ChatGPT to send a message for you, or to schedule an appointment for you, or to route you to a destination. And so there's a few shortcuts that are basically trying to access function calling through ChatGPT. And it's always hard. So if you're going to use the ChatGPT app, as this shortcut is doing, then there is no function calling. You can't access that part of the API. Whereas if you access ChatGPT via the API, the way that function calling works is in your API call to OpenAI, you provide your prompt, and then you also provide a list of functions. And the function has a name, and it has a return type, and the return type is a dictionary. So for example, if you wanted ChatGPT to return a JSON dictionary that you could use to make a new calendar event, then you could define a function called parse calendar events, and the return type would be a dictionary that had title, location, attendees, start time, end time, and then each of those, it's not just a text item. You can use any valid JSON type. And so if you want something to return a number of attendees, you can tell it it's an integer. And if you want it to return a date-time object, you can tell it it's a date-time object. And this will constrain the response from OpenAI so that you're guaranteed to get the response you were after. And then when you get the API response from OpenAI, you can check if it's just a text response, which would mean that it didn't find any calendar events to parse, or you can check the flag to see what kind of a return type it is, and it'll say it was a function call. And then here's the name of the function that ChatGPT, or that GPT 3.5 ended up using. And so you can tell that a function was called in a programmatic, explicit way. You can tell what the name of the function was. And once you know that it called a function and that the function was the parse calendar event function, now you know specifically which items are going to be in the JSON dictionary that was returned, and the types of those, the data types of those items. And so that's the proper way to do what shortcuts like Commander GPT and Alpha and Echo are trying to do. Although I should take that back. Echo's a little bit different. Echo, that's based more on explicit commands that you need to learn. So you have to know what commands Echo is listening for. Whereas this one, it's just asking ChatGPT. And so here's the prompt that it's sending to ChatGPT. And again, when you use the ChatGPT app, you can't actually specify a system prompt. And so you just have to try and make the context clear that that part of your prompt is meant to be interpreted as a system prompt. In this case, they've used parentheses, and it starts with system : but there's no real guarantee that that's going to work the way that you wanted it to.
Yeah.
But regardless, so we've got this pretty heavy-handed prompt here. And in addition to the prompt itself, which is saying, you're supposed to be a helpful AI assistant, don't Todd in random info. There's a few typos here, but in addition to the prompt itself, it gets the current date, it gets the system version and the device type, and so ChatGPT can cater its response to acknowledge the fact that you're on a Mac or an iPhone, for example. If you've provided a website URL from Safari as input, then it will extract the article information, so you can get the body of the article, the title, the authors. This only really works if you have like blog posts and stuff like that. And if you run this on Mac, it'll crash because you can't run these article things on Mac.
That's weird.
Yeah, Shortcuts is just not quite cross-compatible in terms of all the different actions. But if there is an article that passes the entirety of the article here, what does it do? Yeah, it does the body of the article. So it passes that whole thing inside of the prompt. If there's anything in your clipboard, it passes that to the prompt. It tells you what your battery level is. It gets the current weather conditions, and so it's going to require location information. It says no emojis, but yeah, good luck. Good luck stopping ChatGPT from responding with emojis.
I repeat, no emojis. I like that in the prompt.
Yeah, again and again and again. I've gone through this same song and dance. It doesn't work as consistently as you like. You're like, no emojis, I swear. Some people, you'll read on Reddit different ways of prompting. You have to say, like, pretend to be a grandma who can't use emojis. Or if you use an emoji, I'll kill your family and make you pay $1,000. Like, really weird stuff. Oops. And so, by using them as JSON values, and so like here it's telling it that there's different commands that it can do. So there's a flashlight command, there's a dark mode command, B mode is battery saver, BNES is
brightness.
Brightness, okay. That's it. Sorry, interesting types of abbreviation here. And so you've got different ways. Like it's basically, we're telling ChatGPT that it's supposed to infer potentially different types of desired commands and operations from the user, and it wants ChatGPT to respond from these commands in a JSON. And then here's a really good way to make sure that ChatGPT knows what you're talking about is you can provide examples of the JSON dictionary that it's supposed to do.
Nice.
And so, yeah, it's got B mode, just different examples here. And then finally, at the end of all of that, so that's a mouthful, especially since it might contain your clipboard content, which could be a huge text string or an image or something. And it also it could possibly contain an article, the entire body of an article. In addition to all of that, you've got whatever the provided input is. So it might be summarize this article, or it might be, compute this value, and you've got some mathematical expression copied to your clipboard.
I love the bottom there too. It's any mistakes will cause a deduction in points. You start at 1. At 0, you don't get to exist.
Just in case it's sentient, we want to make sure that it fears for its life.
Oh, God.
This is a good trick of modern capitalist business theory. And so
that's hilarious.
Yeah, and so then once it gets the result, it gets to check if there was a JSON dictionary in the result, the get dictionary from Ask ChatGPT. And then if there is a dictionary, then it checks for the various commands that have been defined. And then it gets to execute the appropriate action. And so this is, as I said before, this is a way to try and get essentially function calling out of ChatGPT without using their function calling API. And this is the only way that you can do it if you want to use the ChatGPT app, which is nice because then you can access this stuff for free. You don't have to go get an API key or anything. So very cool. I think my favorite thing about this is that the user doesn't have to know any of this. The user
Right.
just executes it and types in a prompt, which is very cool. So very well done shortcut. H
The
dud
lowest
HYX
common
HD.
denominator. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead. I was just trying to say the username.
Oh, yeah. I know usernames are always so hard to pronounce. But yeah, no, I think this is awesome for like the lowest common denominator of users who, I think so. Shortcuts comes installed on phones now, right? Or do you have to actually go install it? I don't remember.
I think it's installed by
But
default.
yeah, so that's kind of nice because most of my friends have iPhones, and I'll do little different things with it, for fun. Just in general, like I have a shortcut to play the sad trombone song on the action or the sound on my action button of my watch. And of course, I have to play it now. So I do that to my buddy when we play disc golf, and people are like, "How do you do that?" I'm like, "It's really easy. I'll show you," and they never want to know.
Right. I like that too.
So
I like the idea of releasing a shortcut that purports to do something that every shortcut user wants, but that shortcuts can't actually do. And then when they run it, it just plays the sad trombone.
oh God, that's funny.
It's like, finally, a shortcut that can restart your phone without user confirmation. Wow, 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 wow.
I should, I'm gonna do that actually. I'm gonna throw that sound in there somewhere.
Yeah.
So.
Since there's no downvote on Routinehub, what have you got to lose? Or maybe post it on r/shortcuts.
Oh God. Oh my God. Oh, that's hilarious. So
So,
yeah, there's some I don't know. I don't want to wrap things up too quick here because we do have a little bit of time left. But those were some really cool examples. A little bit of overlap with the launcher and the iControl, and even I guess with iControl and Fancy Login, because there is a login for iCuts. So airdrop message was really fun. So yeah, these are some good picks. So I don't know if we've started doing some sort of a theme, right? Like we had talked about that before, where there's going to be sort of a theme for these
no, this time
review
around
sessions.
it was just Holloway Roberts taking a sampling from the submissions.
Right.
A good mix of advanced and less advanced shortcuts this time around.
Yeah.
Now, with the time that we have left, I do want to talk about Action Editor, which is really cool.
Right.
One of the things in shortcuts that it continues to be missing in like a built-in capacity is the ability to easily copy more than one shortcut's action from one shortcut to another. And Gluebyte, the author of Action Editor, he's also made the Join Shortcuts shortcut, which is just amazing. So I use Join Shortcuts for every shortcut that I do that isn't very simple. And the reason that I use it is because it allows you to make a shortcut as multiple shortcuts. So if you have different functions that you need to write for your shortcut, you can develop them as standalone shortcuts, test them in a standalone way, and then once everything's working, you throw all these function shortcuts into a main shortcut, and now you can have a very complex shortcut that runs as a standalone shortcut. So it simplifies the installation process for users. It simplifies the running process by getting rid of permissions dialogues, asking for permission to run other shortcuts. Just a really useful tool. The main drawback of Join Shortcuts is that you basically need to have a Mac that is running a new enough version of Mac OS that it can run shortcuts, because you need a Mac in order to sign the resulting shortcut that is created from all of these joined shortcuts. And so it's really amazing, and its only downside is this limitation that's not Gluebyte's fault. It's just a limitation of iOS to not be able to sign shortcuts. But this shortcut here, Action Editor, it circumvents this. And the way that it does so is Gluebyte discovered, and he's the only one who could have possibly discovered this. Oh, I'm sorry. It's .dev. Shout out to .dev, who figured out that all you need to do, you can copy a shortcut, and now the shortcut is on your clipboard, and now you can have another shortcut fetch the contents of the clipboard, but interpret it as the correct type of plist file, which is sort of like an XML file, I think, in a way that still tells the operating system that it's meant to be interpreted as a shortcut action. And this allows you to select entire groups of shortcuts and copy them from one shortcut to another on iOS or macOS. And the only requirement is that you have the free Actions app. And the only thing that Actions does is it fetches the universal type identifier from the copied shortcut in order to see that it has this Apple Shortcuts action universal type. And so I highly recommend anyone who's doing more advanced type of shortcut development, or if you've bent over backwards to get something working in one shortcut and now you need that collection of actions inside of some other shortcut, some new shortcut that you're developing, this is a way to do that directly on your iOS device without having to organize things as separate shortcuts, use the join shortcuts shortcut to combine them. Instead, you can just, so like here's an example, instead you just copy the shortcut. It can identify it as a little block of a plist file, and then you can just paste that right into a destination shortcut. So very, very cool, super handy development tool for shortcut developers. And then we can see here what's going on in here. It's not very random number. We've got some update checks. Yeah, so here's the actual shortcut. And so when you copy a shortcut item, it has the file type of an Apple plist file. Then it uses the Actions app to set the uniform type identifier. It's able to explicitly specify that it's not just a plist file, it's a Apple Shortcuts action. And once you've done that, what a funny trick. Then you can copy it to the clipboard, copy it back from the clipboard, and once you've done that, it now acts as if you have just tapped on a shortcut action and selected copy. And so previously that was the only way to really copy paste shortcut actions between shortcuts, is to tap the icon on one action, select copy, go into your other shortcut, so I could copy here and then I could select some other shortcut icon, and then you get options for pasting. So I can like paste it above, and now I've pasted it in here. But this provides a way to do that with multiple actions, which is potentially really powerful and could really speed up and simplify the development process, allow you to reuse code, as it were, between shortcuts. So very useful, very great tool, very good contribution to the shortcuts community. So thank you, Gluebyte, thank you, .dev, for the work that you did here.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be checking this out, and the join shortcuts as well. I didn't know that you had to run join shortcuts on a Mac, so that's kind of interesting. So
yeah, so join shortcuts is cool. So I keep that one on my menu bar because that's a great way to access it. And so like join shortcuts, you select a destination shortcut. So you get to search through all your shortcuts. You get to select a destination shortcut. Then it lists out all the comment actions that are in the shortcut. And so like, say for example, you wanted to embed a shortcut updater inside of some shortcut that you have developed. You would create a comment that says check for updates. Pretty sure I've got one down here. Here's like auto update. So you would create a comment that basically says check for updates. Select that as the place to insert the shortcut, and then oops, try this again. And then search for your embeddable shortcut updater, and it just sticks it in there. And so now that's done. And if I'm all done with adding in, so you can do multiple joins in one session. When you're all done joining stuff, you say finish joining, and then it just creates on the fly, which is just, it's magic. It's just really cool how this works. It just creates the new shortcut on the fly. And so now here's the same shortcut with the auto updater embedded inside of it. And then come down to the bottom. Dear God. I probably could have picked a better shortcut. Come down to the bottom, and then you have the ability to create the shortcut, go through the setup stuff, and then decide if you want to replace the destination shortcut with the one that has the source shortcut joined inside of it, or make a copy so that way you don't potentially make any mistakes and lose stuff that you've been working on. And so I use this extensively for my more advanced shortcuts. It's a really amazing tool. And so that's join shortcuts. And Action Editor, it has a lot of overlap with what you would use join shortcuts for. The biggest advantage that it has is that the last step of join shortcuts, where it brought up the shortcut import screen, you can't do that on iOS. If you're on iOS and you run join shortcuts, then instead it starts to explain options for how you can get the shortcut signed. And the go-to way to do it is you connect to your Mac over SSH, and it uses the Mac to sign the shortcut and then copies it back over to your iOS device. And so whether you run it on Mac or on iOS, join shortcuts requires that you have a newer Mac that can run shortcuts in order to sign the resulting shortcut. But Actions Editor gets around this limitation thanks to this awesome discovery by .dev. But I think we're going to wrap stuff up. Don't quite have enough time to go through Smart Send. But before we do, does anyone in the audience want to chime in with any questions that they have or comments?
Crickets.
Wow, this was one of the best shortcut review sessions yet, I think. This is really thorough. Thank you guys again. I feel like if anyone has something to say, they might hop into the text channel, but usually our developers are kind of shy to hop on a voice chat, but we'll see. As far as the theme goes for like the next event, I'm super open to hear ideas. Whatever you guys think would be a cool format for the following events.
Yeah.
I'm sure we can talk that over.
Yeah, for sure. Only thing I have to add is maybe next time we'll make a little space at the end to go over the menu generator, just because it's so cool, and I think it's going to help a lot of people with creating the beautiful vCard menus. So
yeah, so I really like the idea of doing themes because once we've had a few more sessions recorded and published, if they're theme sessions, then now people that are browsing through this library of shortcut review sessions, it becomes really clear for them which ones that they might be interested in. So like menu generator, we could have a theme for shortcuts development. And then we could really dive into these things, and this would be of great interest to more hardcore shortcut developers. Some other themes that come to mind are artificial intelligence centered themes.
That'd be awesome.
Ones that are using Google Gemini and ChatGPT, or even locally hosted large language models and image generators and video generators. One thing, I've seen some Reddit posts about people using ChatGPT to essentially write shortcuts for them. I also saw, in I think the most recent Routinehub newsletter, there was is pointing out one of the shortcuts by Procreations, and it was a specific shortcut designed to use Gemini Pro to help you design a shortcut. And
awesome.
Moving forward, we've got things like Cherry Lang and Jellycuts that let you program a shortcut using something that looks more like a regular programming language. And so if that kind of stuff gets digested by Google Gemini and ChatGPT, then you could potentially have these things be writing shortcuts for you explicitly, the same way that they can write a website for you or a Python program. And so, maybe give it another couple of weeks or months before we did like a shortcut AI theme. But I'm really excited to see where that goes. Another potential theme we could do is photo and video editors. Another potential theme would be content downloaders. I know there's a lot of really popular downloader shortcuts. There could also be shortcuts for like server management, some of these more technical utilitarian uses of shortcuts that people don't often think about. That could be cool because otherwise, like there's the App Store is this endless labyrinth of apps trying to solve problems that maybe you have and you didn't know about it, or maybe they're just a solution in search of a problem. But shortcuts has the potential to replace the functionality of a lot of different App Store apps. And while I don't want to detract from the hard work of iOS app developers, from the user's perspective, a lot of people are very nervous about having to pay up front for an app that they might not get much use out of, or start a subscription that they might forget that they have, and now they're just dumping money into a service or a tool that they don't actually utilize. Whereas if you can do this in the form of a shortcut, then Shortcuts is already baked into the operating system. It's already installed on your device. If you download it and use it once and forget that it exists, you haven't lost anything. And every shortcut is, by its very nature, open source for the most part, except for those that call out to like Procreations Pro AI calls out to his own server, where he runs a proxy server to access Google Gemini. And so sometimes it can be hidden from the user, but for the most part, shortcuts are completely open source, and you can crack them open and see how they work, and you can learn from them. And you can, if there's something that you don't like about a shortcut, you can just change it. So like with the launcher shortcut, in order to run that on iOS for the sake of this review session, I went in and added a create folder action to get around the error that I was getting because iCloud Drive wasn't syncing the files proactively. And it's so cool to be able to open up a shortcut, scroll down a little bit, throw an action in there, and then rerun it, and now it does what you want it to. And so there's a lot of things that makes Shortcut much more attractive than traditional solutions offered through the App Store. So that's another cool potential theme that we could do is going after more like server admin type shortcuts as well.
That is amazing. Yeah, that's the most profound thing I've heard. That's amazing. I just never thought of that exact kind of the thought that, yeah, you're right. The App Store, there's a lot of things on there that I think shortcuts can do without having to, download another app. That's amazing to think about. So,
and then especially like, if you throw like Pythonista in the mix, which is and there's also PyTo. Both of those are like full-fledged Python installations that run on your device. Really powerful stuff. And then there's Scriptable, which is a full-fledged. Is it just JavaScript, or is it also? I think it's just JavaScript. But it's like having JavaScript actually installed and runnable to the user. Which previously these are things that you could do if you were jailbroken. But there's some apps now that if you just have that one app scriptable in the mix, then the ceiling for what you can achieve with shortcuts goes through the roof.
Right. Yeah.
And so like we might have like another theme might just be shortcuts that are using data jar, and another theme could be shortcuts that are utilizing scriptable. And so there's a lot of really cool advanced themes and topics that we could do. And so I think moving forward, we should probably alternate between, some of the more, beginner shortcuts user, or even, shortcuts that are intended for people that never want to write a shortcut in their whole life. People that are just trying to provide a product for other people to download and use. Those are cool themes. But given the nature of Routinehub as sort of an educational community, I also like the idea of these more advanced themes.
Yeah, and on noting on the beginner side too, I think it'd be cool to have I like the alternating thing too, but just having more of like just the tutorial sessions of like some super simple shortcuts that are maybe 10 actions max or something that achieve something that either a paid app or a subscription app can do. So a great example of that, and obviously it's way more than 10 actions, but is what's Mac Stories, Apple Frames shortcut. That's what I use for all the screenshot things that I do. There's a really good app called SM Pro or something like that that's kind of clunky to use, but it's really powerful as far as embedding screenshots into like what looks like an iPhone. But yeah, and just I guess wrapping it up real quick here, I think we kind of riff off each other really well because you're like way more advanced than I am, but I can mostly follow what you're talking about. But I'm definitely much more on the newbie side of things, and so to make some themes more approachable to sort of everybody, it'd be like this session we're talking about just how to do all this stuff, or even just these short one-off shortcuts. So.
Yeah, on that note, I wonder if it would be cool, depending on the theme, to try and get a like a complete user type of commentator in here with us. And so then it would be like, here's this shortcut, and before I dive in, let's have Bob here talk about what his user experience was like. And then we get someone who doesn't know anything about shortcuts, who's just trying to find solutions to some problem that a typical iPhone user might have, and we could get their input on it. But without further ado, I think I'm going to wrap this up because I have to hit the road real quick. But thanks so much, guys, for coming in.
Yeah.
Thanks, Howard Roberts. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Jpasholk. It's been a really good time, and we'll see you guys.
Yeah, see you at the next one. Thank you.
See you guys.
Bye.